Max Harris stood at the edge of the dirt road, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder as the old bus that had dropped him off rumbled away, leaving a trail of dust in the late afternoon light. The mountain air was crisp with the scent of pine and the faint promise of winter creeping in. Max had been away for 2 weeks at camp, excited to get home, back to his quiet mountain town nestled in the shadows of the towering peaks. He had missed the town, its cozy familiarity, the friendly faces he had known all his life, and the constant, comforting song of birds that filled the air. But something felt wrong. As Max looked around, an eerie silence hung in the air. He hadn't heard a single bird since stepping off the bus, something he normally wouldn't have noticed. Except that in their absence, the silence became overwhelming. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, a quiet so deep it seemed to weigh down the town itself. He started walking toward home, his footsteps the only sound in the empty street. The houses he passed were all closed up, curtains drawn tight. There was no sign of the usual activity. No kids playing in yards, no cars driving by, no dogs barking. Just silence. Max's heart quickened, a strange tension creeping up his spine. He checked his phone, wondering if maybe he had missed some local event or holiday that had sent everyone inside. But there was no service. There never was in these remote parts of the mountains, not until you got closer to the town center. He'd always liked the isolation, the sense of being far away from the noise of the outside world. Now, though, it felt like a prison. As he approached his family's house, nestled at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, Max saw his mother's car in the driveway. Relief washed over him. Whatever weird vibe the town had, it would disappear once he got home and settled back in. His mom would be there, probably fussing over the laundry or starting dinner, and everything would feel normal again. He pushed open the gate and walked up to the front door. The house looked just as it always had, quaint with its white shutters and the small garden his mom tended every spring. He knocked on the door, hesitated, and knocked again. After a long pause, he tried the handle. It was unlocked. "Mom," Max called as he stepped inside. The house was unusually cold, like the heat hadn't been on for days. He dropped his duffel bag by the door and walked through the entryway, glancing around. The living room was dim, the blinds partially closed. A half-drunk cup of coffee sat on the kitchen table, long since gone cold. "Mom," he called again, louder this time. There was no answer. His stomach tightened. Max walked further into the house, the eerie quiet pressing in on him. He checked the bedrooms, the bathroom. Every room empty. It was as though his family had just vanished. He returned to the living room, his mind racing. The town felt deserted. His house felt wrong. And the birds. Where were the birds? There had always been birds in the mountains, filling the air with their songs. Now all he heard was the distant wind whispering through the pines. Suddenly, a creaking noise came from the back of the house. Max froze. It wasn't a normal house sound. It was the distinct creak of a floorboard, deliberate, like someone was there. He grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter and cautiously walked toward the sound. The door to the basement was slightly ajar, something his mom would never allow, always keeping it locked since Max was a kid. He hesitated before pushing the door open, fully staring into the darkness below. His breath hitched as he heard something shuffling down there, slow and deliberate. He clenched the knife tighter and flicked the basement light switch. Nothing happened. The bulb was out. "Hello?" Max called, his voice shaky. There was no response, just more shuffling, closer now. Max's heart pounded in his chest as he backed away, closing the basement door and bolting it shut. His mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. Something was horribly wrong in this town, and he had to find out what. He grabbed his jacket and headed out the front door, his footsteps quickening as he walked back into town. The streets were just as empty as before, but as he approached the town center, he spotted a figure standing outside the small grocery store. It was Mr. Jameson, the store owner, leaning against the wall with a blank expression, staring off into the distance. "Mr. Jameson," Max called, relieved to see someone he knew. The man didn't respond, didn't even look at him. Max approached cautiously, waving a hand in front of Mr. Jameson's face. "Hey, are you okay?" "What's going on?" "Still nothing." Mr. Jameson's eyes were vacant, as if he wasn't really there. A cold chill ran down Max's spine. He took a step back and noticed, just barely, the man's lips moving. Muttering something too faint for Max to hear, he leaned closer, straining to make out the words. "The birds are gone." "They took them." Max recoiled, a knot tightening in his stomach. "Who took them? What are you talking about?" Mr. Jameson blinked slowly, his eyes dull and unfocused, and repeated in a monotone voice, "The birds are gone. They took them." Max backed away, his mind spinning. He turned and hurried toward the diner, hoping to find someone. Anyone who could give him answers. But when he reached the diner, the same eerie scene greeted him. People sat at the booths, their food untouched, their faces blank. Some muttered quietly to themselves. Others simply stared into space, a sharp dread gnawed at Max. This wasn't normal. Something had happened while he was gone. Something that had taken over the entire town. He was about to leave when he spotted movement in the corner of the diner. A girl, about his age, crouched behind one of the counters, her eyes wide with fear. When she saw him looking, she motioned for him to come over. Max hurried to her, his heart pounding. "What's going on? Do you know what happened here?" The girl looked around nervously before whispering, "You shouldn't be here. They'll come for you too." "Who? What are you talking about?" "The birds," she said, her voice trembling. The birds disappeared, and then it started. People started acting strange. Like they weren't themselves anymore. It's like something took them something. She trailed off, her eyes darting to the windows. Max swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" "What took them?" She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know. It's like they're being controlled, like they're not really alive anymore. And the birds, they were the first to go. I think whatever it is, it's connected to them." A shiver ran through Max's body. He glanced out the window, where the trees stood still and silent, no birds in sight. "We need to leave," he said, his voice firm. "We need to get out of this town." The girl nodded, her fear palpable. "But where do we go? How do we escape something we can't see?" Max didn't have an answer. All he knew was that they couldn't stay. Not if they wanted to survive. As the two of them left the diner and walked into the silent, empty streets, Max felt a growing sense of unease, as though they were being watched by something unseen lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. The birds were gone, and with them had gone the town's soul, leaving behind only husks of the people he once knew. And somewhere, deep within the mountains, Max knew the answer to the town's strange behavior was waiting. He just wasn't sure if he wanted to find it.